I was standing at the kitchen counter, watching the ice melt in my glass of iced tea, when I heard Lisa's voice drift in from the dining room. She was laughing at something my son Michael said. That particular laugh she used when she wanted everyone to think she was the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. I'd heard that laugh 1,000 times over the past 3 years since they married. It never sounded quite right to me, like a song played just slightly off-key. The November sun was already setting outside the window, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. I'd arrived at their house in Maple Grove 2 hours earlier to help with Thanksgiving preparations, just like I did every year, just like I'd done for every holiday since Michael married Lisa. She'd called me 3 days ago, her voice sweet as honey, asking if I could come early to help with the cooking. "You know how much everyone loves your stuffing recipe, Eleanor?" she'd said. "And I'm just so overwhelmed with everything this year." I should have known something was off then. Lisa had never asked for my help before. In fact, she usually made a point of doing everything herself, making sure everyone knew how capable she was, how she didn't need anyone. But I'd pushed my suspicions aside, told myself I was being paranoid, being one of those bitter mother-in-laws who saw problems where there weren't any. Now, standing in her pristine kitchen with its white marble countertops and stainless steel appliances, I felt that same prickle of unease I'd felt on the phone. Something was wrong, I just didn't know what yet. I picked up my glass and was about to take a sip when I noticed Lisa had come into the kitchen. She moved quietly, almost too quietly, her nurse's shoes making barely a sound on the tile floor. She worked at Mercy Hospital, pediatric unit, always telling people how much she loved children, how rewarding it was to care for them. Michael thought she was an angel. I'd learned to keep my observations to myself. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, startling me. I hadn't realized she was right behind me. "Let me get you some fresh tea. That one's been sitting out for a while." She reached for my glass before I could respond, her fingers brushing against mine. They were cold, despite the warmth of the kitchen. "It's fine," I said, pulling the glass closer to me. "I just poured it." No, I insist. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You've been working so hard all afternoon. Let me take care of you for once." She took the glass from my hand with a gentle but firm grip, and I watched as she poured the tea down the sink. "See? All gone. I'll make you a fresh one." I stood there, my hands empty, wondering why this small interaction felt so significant, so wrong. Lisa moved to the refrigerator and pulled out the pitcher of tea I'd made earlier. She poured a new glass, added ice, and set it on the counter in front of me. "There you go," she said. "Much better. Now, why don't you go relax in the living room? Michael's dying to tell you about his promotion." "I can finish up here," I nodded, picking up the glass, but something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the way she watched me, waiting for me to drink. Maybe it was the slight tremor in her hand when she'd set the glass down. Or maybe it was just instinct. The same instinct that had told me something was off about Lisa from the day I met her. I carried the glass into the living room but didn't drink from it. Instead, I set it on the coffee table and sat next to Michael on the couch. My son looked happy, truly happy. His face flushed with excitement as he told me about his new position as senior architect at Henderson and Cole. I tried to focus on his words, tried to be present, but my mind kept drifting back to that glass of tea, sitting there on the table, condensation forming on its sides. It was during dinner that I first noticed the pattern. Lisa had positioned herself at the head of the table, opposite Michael, which put her in direct view of me. Every few minutes, her eyes would flick to my plate, to my glass, checking, waiting. When I didn't drink from the glass I'd brought from the living room, she suggested we all have some wine instead. "Eleanor doesn't drink wine with dinner," Michael reminded her gently. "Oh, of course," Lisa said, her smile tight. "How silly of me to forget. Let me get you some fresh tea, Eleanor. That glass must be warm by now." "I'm fine with water," I said. "Nonsense. You love iced tea. I'll be right back." She disappeared into the kitchen, and I found myself making a decision. I stood up, ignoring Michael's questioning look, and followed her. Lisa had her back to me when I entered the kitchen. She was standing at the counter, her body slightly hunched over something. I could see her right hand moving, but I couldn't see what she was doing. When she heard my footsteps, she straightened up quickly, turning around with a glass in her hand. But I'd seen something. On the counter, partially hidden behind the flour canister, was a small orange prescription bottle. I couldn't read the label from where I stood, but I knew that color. I'd been looking at bottles that color for the past 5 years, ever since my diabetes diagnosis. "I thought I'd save you the trip," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Getting old, you know, all this walking around." Lisa's laugh was forced. "Don't be silly, you're not old. Here." She handed me the glass. "Fresh and cold, just how you like it." I took the glass, watched her face, watched the way she was watching my hands, and I understood, in that moment, exactly what was happening. My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral, kept my hand steady. "You know what?" I said. "I actually do want wine tonight. It's a celebration. After all, Michael's promotion. Let me just set this down." I placed the glass on the counter, right next to where I'd seen that orange bottle. Lisa's smile faltered for just a second, so brief I might have imagined it. "Oh," she said. "Are you sure? I made this especially for you." "I'm sure. But thank you, sweetheart." I left the kitchen, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I needed to think. I needed to be certain. Because if I was right about what I'd just seen, if I was right about what Lisa was trying to do, then everything I thought I knew about my son's marriage was a lie. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced conversation and fake smiles. I watched Lisa like a hawk, watched how she moved, how she interacted with everyone, and I started to see things I'd been missing before. The way she controlled every conversation, steering it away from any topic that might make her look bad. The way she touched Michael's arm possessively whenever another woman spoke to him. The way she calculated every gesture, every word, like a chess player planning 5 moves ahead. By the time dessert was served, I'd made my decision. I needed proof, and I knew exactly how to get it. "Lisa, dear," I said, "would you mind if I used your bathroom? The one upstairs? I'm afraid my back is bothering me, and those stairs would be good exercise." "Of course," she said, but I saw the flash of concern in her eyes. "Do you need help?" "I'm fine. Just point me in the right direction." As I climbed the stairs, I could feel her watching me. But once I was out of sight, I moved quickly. I didn't go to the bathroom. Instead, I went to the master bedroom. I'd only been in there once before, when Lisa gave me a tour after they first bought the house. She'd been proud then, showing off the walk-in closet, the ensuite bathroom with its jacuzzi tub. Now I moved through the room with purpose, heading straight for her bedside table. Inside the drawer were the usual things: reading glasses, hand lotion, a sleep mask. But underneath, wrapped in a small cloth, was what I was looking for: 3 prescription bottles. I pulled them out carefully, reading the labels in the dim light from the hallway. Insulin, all 3 bottles. But the name on the prescriptions wasn't Lisa's. They weren't even from Mercy Hospital. These were from a clinic in Riverside, 40 miles away. And the patient name had been partially scratched off, but I could still make out most of it. None of the letters matched Lisa's name. I took a photo with my phone, my hands shaking. Then I carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it and went to the bathroom, flushing the toilet for authenticity before heading back downstairs. Lisa was in the kitchen again when I descended. I could hear her moving around, and curiosity pulled me toward the doorway. I stayed hidden in the hall, watching. She had 2 glasses on the counter. One was the tea she'd made me earlier. The other was a fresh glass. As I watched, she picked up that orange prescription bottle, the same one I'd seen before, and tapped something into the fresh glass. Then she stirred it, watching the liquid carefully. After a moment, she poured it down the sink and refilled the glass with fresh tea. She was practicing, making sure the insulin dissolved completely, making sure there was no trace. My retired teacher's salary had been modest, but I'd saved diligently my whole life. I owned my house outright, had a substantial retirement fund, and had recently mentioned to Michael that I was updating my will. Lisa was going to kill me. And she was going to make it look like my diabetes had gotten out of control, like I'd made a mistake with my own medication. I must have made a sound, because she turned around sharply. Our eyes met, and for just a second, I saw something in her face that confirmed everything. Not guilt, not fear, just cold calculation, like she was adjusting her strategy on the fly. "Eleanor," she said, her voice perfectly pleasant, "I was just making you a fresh tea for the road. I know you have that long drive home." "How thoughtful," I said. She brought the glass toward me, and I had to fight every instinct not to run, not to scream, not to knock it from her hands. Instead, I smiled. "Actually, Lisa, I was wondering if you could help me with something in the dining room. There's a dish I can't quite reach on the top shelf." "Oh, of course. Let me just—" She set the glass on the counter. "Let me just grab this for you first." "No, no," I said. "The dish first. The tea can wait. I'm not thirsty yet anyway." She had no choice but to follow me into the dining room. I led her to the china cabinet and pointed at a serving platter on the top shelf, one I didn't need at all. While she stood on her tiptoes reaching for it, I slipped back into the kitchen. The glass she'd prepared was still on the counter, exactly where she'd left it. Next to it was her own glass of wine, half empty. My hands moved before I could second-guess myself. I switched them, placing her wine where my tea had been, and my tea where her wine had been. It was done in seconds. I moved back to the doorway just as Lisa came out with the platter. "Here you go," she said. "Thank you, dear. You know, I think I will take that tea after all. For the road, like you said." I walked to the counter and picked up what had been her wine glass. She picked up what she thought was her tea, what was actually the insulin-laced drink she'd prepared for me. "Cheers," I said, lifting my glass. She lifted hers automatically, a social reflex. I watched her bring it to her lips. I watched her take a long drink. The part of me that had been a teacher for 38 years, the part that had dedicated my life to protecting children, felt a wave of guilt, but the part of me that had just realized my daughter-in-law was trying to murder me felt something else entirely. Justice. We returned to the living room together. Michael was showing his cousin David something on his phone, both of them laughing. Lisa's sister Karen was helping herself to more pumpkin pie. Everything looked so normal, so perfect, a typical Thanksgiving evening. 20 minutes later, Lisa started to feel it. I was the only one who noticed at first. She got very quiet, her face going pale. She set down her coffee cup with a trembling hand. "Lisa?" Michael looked at her with concern. "You okay, honey?" I feel strange." Her voice was weak, dizzy. "Maybe you should sit down," Karen suggested. "No, Lisa stood up abruptly, swaying. "I think I need to lie down." "I don't." She didn't finish the sentence. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed. Michael caught her before she hit the floor, his face going white with panic. "Lisa! Lisa! Can you hear me?" He was shaking her gently. "Someone call 911. David already had his phone out, dialing. I stood frozen, watching, as Michael laid Lisa on the floor, checking her pulse, her breathing. I should have felt scared. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt strangely calm. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. They worked efficiently, checking her vitals, asking questions. Michael was frantic, trying to explain that she'd been fine 1 minute and collapsed the next. One of the paramedics, a young woman with kind eyes, looked at Lisa's medical alert bracelet. "Is she diabetic?" she asked. "No," Michael said. "No, she's not. She's a nurse. She's perfectly healthy." But they were already loading her onto a stretcher, hooking up an IV. I heard them say something about her blood sugar being dangerously low. One of them asked if there was insulin in the house. Michael looked confused. "Insulin? No. Why would we have insulin?" They took her to Mercy Hospital, the same hospital where she worked. Michael rode in the ambulance. I offered to drive Karen and David, giving them a chance to talk in the back seat while I focused on the road. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. I'd been driving these streets for 40 years. I knew every turn, every light. At the hospital, we waited and waited. Michael paced the emergency room like a caged animal, desperate for news. When the doctor finally came out, his face was grave. "Your wife is stable," he said. "But I need to ask you some questions. Has she been acting strangely lately? Any changes in behavior, mood swings, anything unusual?" Michael shook his head. "No, nothing. She's been the same as always." "What happened? What's wrong with her?" The doctor hesitated. "We found extremely high levels of insulin in her bloodstream, but according to her medical records, she's not diabetic. She shouldn't have access to insulin at all, except what? Except professionally. She's a pediatric nurse. She would have access to medication at work." The doctor paused. "Mr. Thompson, I have to ask, has your wife been under any unusual stress? Any financial problems? Legal issues? Anything that might cause her to what?" Michael's voice rose. "What are you suggesting?" "In cases like this, with unexplained insulin overdose, we have to consider all possibilities, including the possibility that the overdose was intentional." The words hung in the air. Michael stared at the doctor like he'd spoken a foreign language. Then he laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "That's insane. Lisa would never. She helps people. She saves children's lives. You're saying she tried to hurt herself? That's impossible." But I could see the seed of doubt in his eyes now, the tiny crack in his certainty. "They kept Lisa overnight for observation. Michael stayed with her, refusing to leave her side. Karen and David went home. I drove back to the house alone, ostensibly to clean up from dinner, but really because I needed to do something. I let myself in with the spare key Michael had given me years ago. The house was quiet, all the laughter and warmth from earlier completely gone. I went straight to the master bedroom. This time, I didn't hide what I was doing. I searched thoroughly, methodically, the way I used to search students' backpacks when I suspected someone had stolen from a classmate. I found the insulin bottles in the bedside drawer where I'd seen them before. I found more in her bathroom, hidden behind the tampons in the cabinet under the sink. I found records too, printed emails from the clinic in Riverside, prescription receipts with obviously fake names, and I found something else. A journal, tucked in the back of her closet behind a stack of sweaters. I almost didn't open it. It felt like a violation, even after everything, but I forced myself to read. The entries were sporadic, sometimes weeks apart, but they told a clear story. Lisa had been planning this for months. She wrote about Michael's mother, about how I was in the way, about how Michael would inherit everything when I died, and how she could help that happen. She wrote about researching insulin overdose, about how it would look like I'd made a mistake with my own medication. She even wrote about the timing, waiting until after Thanksgiving when everyone would be too distracted to notice anything suspicious. The last entry was from 2 days ago. "Everything is ready. This Thanksgiving, we'll have a lot to be grateful for." I took photos of every page. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Detective Morrison had been a student of mine once, back when he was a troubled teenager who'd gotten caught shoplifting. I'd been the one who'd convinced the judge to give him community service instead of jail time. I'd been the one who'd believed in him when no one else did. He'd told me once that I'd saved his life, that I'd shown him a different path. He'd given me his card when he graduated from the police academy, told me to call if I ever needed anything. Now I needed something. He arrived 40 minutes later, in plain clothes, his badge clipped to his belt. I showed him everything. The insulin, the journal, the photos from the clinic. He listened without interrupting, his face growing harder with each piece of evidence. "Mrs. Thompson," he said when I finished, "do you understand what you're telling me? I understand that my daughter-in-law tried to kill me tonight. I understand that I switched our drinks, and she ended up taking the insulin she'd prepared for me. I understand that if I hadn't, I would probably be dead right now. He nodded slowly. And you're sure you want to do this? Press charges? Once we start this investigation, there's no going back. Your son will know everything. My son needs to know everything, I said. The truth doesn't stop being the truth just because it hurts. He made some calls. Within an hour, there were other officers at the house, collecting evidence, taking photos, bagging the insulin bottles, the journal, everything. They asked me to come to the station to give a formal statement. I did, walking them through the entire evening, from the moment I arrived until the moment Lisa collapsed. It was almost dawn when I finally left the police station. Detective Morrison walked me to my car. She'll be arrested as soon as she's medically cleared, he said. The DA will probably charge her with attempted murder. With all this evidence, the premeditation, the journal, she's looking at serious time, Eleanor. I know. Your son is going to be devastated. I know that too. He squeezed my shoulder gently. You did the right thing. You know that, right? If you hadn't figured it out, if you hadn't been smart enough to switch those drinks. I'm a teacher, detective. Pattern recognition is part of the job description. I drove home as the sun came up, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The streets were empty, the world still sleeping. I thought about Michael, about how I would tell him, about how our relationship might never recover from this. I thought about Lisa, about what had driven her to such desperation, such evil, but mostly I thought about that glass of tea sitting on the counter and how close I'd come to drinking it, how close I'd come to never seeing another sunrise. 3 days later, Lisa was arrested at the hospital. The evidence was overwhelming. The insulin bottles with fake prescriptions, the journal detailing her plan, the security camera I hadn't even known existed in their kitchen, which had captured everything. Michael had installed it months ago after they'd had a break-in scare, and Lisa had apparently forgotten about it. The footage showed her preparing the insulin-laced drink. It showed me switching the glasses. It showed everything. Michael came to see me a week after Lisa's arrest. He looked like he'd aged 10 years, his eyes hollow, his face drawn. We sat in my living room, the same living room where I'd helped him with homework as a child, where we'd celebrated his high school graduation, his college acceptance, his wedding. I don't understand, he said, his voice breaking. I don't understand how I didn't see it. How did I not know? She was very good at hiding it, I said gently. She fooled everyone, not just you. But you saw it. You figured it out. I saw what I needed to see, what you couldn't afford to see. He put his face in his hands. She's pregnant, Mom. Did you know that? 3 months. She told me the day before Thanksgiving. I was so happy. I thought we were building a family, building a life. And all that time, she was planning to. He couldn't finish. I moved to sit beside him, put my arm around his shoulders like I used to when he was small and scared of thunderstorms. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. She says she didn't mean it, he said. She says she was just confused, that she made a mistake. Her lawyer is claiming mental illness, postpartum something. Even though the baby isn't born yet, they're saying she wasn't in her right mind. And what do you think? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I think I read her journal. Mom, I think I saw those entries about how much she hated you, how much she resented your interference, how she couldn't wait for you to be gone. I think I heard the police explain how carefully she planned it, how she researched insulin overdose, how she practiced. That's not mental illness. That's evil. I finished for him. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I loved her. I really loved her. How could I love someone capable of that? Because you saw what you wanted to see, what she showed you. That's not your fault, Michael. That's hers. The trial took 18 months. Lisa pleaded not guilty, claimed she'd been trying to take her own life, that the journal was just dark fantasy, that she never intended to hurt anyone, but the evidence was too strong. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before finding her guilty of attempted murder. She was sentenced to 25 years. Michael divorced her while she was awaiting sentencing. The baby, a girl, was born in prison. Michael has custody, though he struggles with it. How do you explain to your daughter that her mother tried to kill her grandmother? As for me, I did something I never expected. I sold my house, the one I'd lived in for 40 years, and used the money to start a foundation. Elder Justice Alliance, I called it. We help elderly people who are being exploited or abused by family members. We provide legal aid, counseling, safe houses when needed. We teach people to recognize the warning signs, to trust their instincts, to speak up. Detective Morrison serves on our board. So does the doctor who treated Lisa that night, the one who recognized that something wasn't right. We've helped 37 people so far. 37 people who might have ended up like I nearly did. I'm 70 now. 2 years have passed since that Thanksgiving. Michael and I have rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. He brings my granddaughter to visit every Sunday. We bake cookies together, read books, play in the park. She's too young to understand what happened, but someday I'll tell her. I'll tell her that sometimes the people who should love us most are the ones we need to be most careful of. That kindness isn't weakness, but it shouldn't be blindness either. I'll tell her that peace is the ultimate victory. Not revenge, not punishment, but peace. I could have stayed silent that night. I could have drunk that tea and hoped for the best. I could have confronted Lisa directly, made a scene, let emotion drive my actions. Instead, I chose something else. I chose to be smart. I chose to gather evidence. I chose to let the truth speak for itself. And the truth was powerful enough. It always is. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment in the kitchen when I switched those glasses. I think about how different everything could have been if I'd made a different choice, if I'd been less observant, less suspicious, less willing to believe that my own daughter-in-law could wish me dead. But I don't regret what I did. Not for a second. Because silence isn't always golden. Sometimes it's deadly. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to be a victim, to see the truth, no matter how painful, and act on it. The tea in my glass that night was poison. But the poison in Lisa's heart was something she'd cultivated long before she ever met my son. I didn't put it there. I just held up a mirror and showed her what she'd become. And in doing so, I saved my own life. That's not revenge. That's just survival. And survival, I've learned, is its own kind of victory.